Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 27th of August 2025. Coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy NC0B.
Hello.
Hello, and from me, David G7RP. Great to see you. On tonight's show, we have the master of rig testing, Rob Sherwood NC0B, with us to discuss what the numbers mean and all the latest updates. All aboard for a new railway in Cromer, which is driven by an amateur. And we find out what on earth this is. Had lots of entries for this, but are they right? If you know what that is, you've got just a few minutes to put them onto Facebook or BATC and we'll include them with our answers. But first, club news. And as advertised some time ago, and also in the newsletter in the last few days, the silent key sale of Paul G3 SEM's remaining equipment is by open day this Saturday between 10 and 2 o'clock. His house is in Hingham, and we've put all of the details that you need either on our website or on the newsletter. If you get the newsletter, that's probably the easiest one to do, and then you can click on that and see a list of all of the equipment and asking prices and everything on there as well. But it is this Saturday, the 30th of August, between 10 and 2. We have said as well, we realise not everybody will be able to make it to Hingham, and the address again is on those details. So if you can't, and there's something that you really want to buy, you can just contact me, and as long as it's a definite purchase, we will take it off sale. All the details again, I've written quite a lot of notes on it, so if you want to know how that works and what the open day is all about and all the sorts of equipment that's going to be there, some of it is really quite high-end amateur radio equipment, but there's also a lot of lower cost things and some things even free from the sort of sheds and things. Paul was an avid constructor, for example, and he's got lots of drawers and components, which with the best will in the world now, you can't really sell for very much. So we'll just be looking for a few donations for charity or something for those, or even giving them away, because we'd rather do that than throw them away, frankly. Anyway, all the details for everything that I could list, and Tammy and I will be doing this sale. Malcolm's coming to help us as well on Saturday. We'll be getting stuff ready both tomorrow and Friday, and everything will be there for 10 till 2 on Saturday. Now, before the item that you see on the screen there, we're going to tell you about something coming up in the RSGB Tonight at 8 series, which Tammy and I host for the RSGB. That's this Monday, the 1st of September. We've got a talk by Kirsten McIntyre, K6WX. And I noticed that our Scottish correspondent, Ralph Harkness, 2E0RHT, M0, sorry, is it? 2M0, yes, of course. I'm so sorry. 2M0RHT. I noticed that he's with us, so he'll be no doubt one of the biggest fans of this. Maxwell's equations in 45 minutes. I reckon that is a brave thing to do. But if you want to know about the fascinations of numbers, we've met Kirsten now for a technical rehearsal, and she's passionate about her maths and technology. But don't make that sound boring, because it isn't. I'm sure that'll be a delightful talk, which lasts about 45 minutes. That's on Monday. The usual place, rsgb.org/webinars. Now back to our slide. And the next club event we've got is next Friday, not this Friday, Friday the 5th of September. I feel like I've been pushing this event for months, and I probably have, actually.
You have, yeah.
But there's a serious deadline coming up now, and today is the deadline. We've now got 28 people going, which is very nice, very wonderful to see that. We've got a big coach which can take 49 people. So if you want to go, and you want to go now, if you can download the form on the website or on the newsletter and pay, send me the form tonight, you will get in on that trip. From tomorrow, though, I'm ordering all of the wristbands tomorrow so that I've got them on the coach. We can give them to everybody, and you'll literally be able to walk off the coach and walk straight in without any queues or anything. We have a special entrance and everything else. After that, I will be taking orders for coach only, which will be £25, but you'll have to buy your own ticket and you'll have to queue up and get in. So if you do know that you want to go and you want to come with us, which would be fantastic, you know all the details by now, I'm sure. There are 2 pickup points east and west of Norwich. But if you want to go, tonight is the deadline, because first thing tomorrow I'll be dropping an email to them and ordering and paying for all the wristbands, and they'll be sent to me by post. Okay, so this is the actual deadline for the £30 all-inclusive. Got Tammy's interest then, saying all-inclusive. Don't worry, it's a Hamfest trip. Now, the next club event after that is next Sunday week, or this Sunday week, if you like. Sunday the 7th September. You may remember that we had to postpone Radio by the Seaside from our July date just because of the awful weather forecast. It was very patchy, but we did get some really bad stuff, including thunderstorms. So we had to postpone it. And we hope everything will be all right for Sunday the 7th of September in our usual place at West Runton. I'll put lots more information on the newsletter and website next week, all the fine details, but basically it's in the Beach Road car park at West Runton on Sunday the 7th September. Hopefully you've already put that in your diary, but this is the last NARC Live now before that. And then finally, just again for your diaries really, if you're interested in our direction finding competitions, the fox hunts as we call them, then we've got a very friendly or crazy one really. I reckon the foxes are going to come up with something quite cunning and different for Sunday the 28th of September. We'll be starting from Thorpe Recreation Ground, but anything other than that I think will be rather different. So there we are, that's the roundup of the last of the summer events really for the summer, but we've done quite a lot. Hope to see you at some of them, maybe at Paul's sale this Saturday as well, where Tammy and I will be there of course for that. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to members' news, and we've had some news this week, which is great to see. Bob G6PWS says this. He sends us a picture first, which we ought to show you now.
Well, this is a little video, actually.
Oh, a video.
Just a very small, quick video.
I'll read out what he said. My granddaughter, who works at the computer centre in Hatfield, suddenly noticed they had a bat hanging on the wall. The granddaughter contacted Bob as she knew that he knew a Batman. I like the way I did that. Who identified it, and he came out and caught it safely. And here he is. Oh, what a lovely little chap. He identified it as a rare young female bat and thanked us for letting him know. Wonderful. A juvenile
I can't decide
female.
if it looks like it's got massive eyes on each side, but I don't think that is.
I don't think
it's
they're
just
eyes.
No.
Aren't they? Are not blind, are they? But
No,
they are
blind.
very limited vision. The blind as a bat is a misnomer, isn't it? Well, no, but you've heard of that saying, haven't you, Tammy?
Yeah.
Blind as
Yeah.
a bat. It's not true, is it? But they're not. They haven't got great vision, but they use sound and stuff.
Yeah.
This isn't a lesson about
Yeah,
the biology of a bat.
obvious.
But there we are. It's a wonderful picture, though, Bob. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And secondly, Steve M7CNI sent us this wonderful picture. Now, some of you, I'm sure, will recognise the chap sitting down. The chain around his collar is because he is the mayor of Cromer, but might be better known to you and me as Richard Leeds G4RZN. Used to be, I'll just quickly tell you this before I read Steve's nice piece here, that some of you with big memories might remember that the club helped the Cromer lifeboat celebrate its 100th year many years ago. And Richard then was the manager of the Cromer lifeboat. And that's how I knew him from all that time. Anyway, this is what Steve has written for us. Last Sunday, the 24th of August 2025, the Mayor of Cromer, Richard Leeds, G4RZN, officially opened and then drove the inaugural public service around Phase 1 of the new Cromer Miniature Railway. This new railway is accessible via the Amazona Zoo car park, which is accessed from Hall Road in Cromer. Richard has been heavily involved with designing and building the new line, which is a 7¼ gauge line. A committee was formed back in 2020 to develop this new railway as a tourist attraction for Cromer, and it currently is operating on a loop line around what will eventually be the loco sheds and workshops. The loco at this time is around 400 yards long, but there is plans to extend it right along the Pick Your Own field to about 1 mile in length. Wow. The inaugural runs on the Sunday and Monday were free of charge, but donation buckets were available for anyone to donate towards this wonderful new line. Richard has said that the line will be open hopefully most weekends between now and mid-October, between 11 and 4. If you fancy visiting, G4RZN, the Mayor of Cromer, could be your loco driver if you're lucky. Volunteers are also being sought to help operate and develop the new line. Well, that's exactly the sort of news that we love to see. It's very much linked to an amateur. Thank you very much, Steve, for that really good picture. I must make it up ourselves and have a look one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what that loco is? Tell me you do, don't you? Please
It's a
tell
green
me.
one.
No, it's a Class 20.
Oh, well, it is. I was going to say that next.
Were you?
Yeah, because it starts 2-0.
Those years of working in the model train industry haven't been wasted, have they? You're
No.
right. There we are. Many thanks, Steve, for that. That's me, mind the talking.
Is that you?
Over to you, Tammy, for our little people.
Here's the little people for this week. So, I don't know what to say because
I haven't seen this.
You're going to make me laugh, bro.
Why?
Have you got any bananas at home at the moment?
I think I have. No, haven't I?
Yeah, I bought some today.
Thank you.
Have you ever cut one open before you put it in your mouth to see what's inside it? Biohazard.
Oh, no. Does that mean I can't have them?
Maybe.
That is really cool. Do you think that's a touched up picture, or is that really what it looks like? Because it does look a bit weird, the inside of a banana.
I don't think
doesn't
it looks like that inside of a banana.
Well, I don't know. I've never cut it with a knife like that. I only just peel the outside like a gorilla, don't say anything, and then just eat it. Rob is our guest, is laughing in the corner there, I can see. Rob, don't laugh like that. We've got to stick together. Anyway, that does look wonderful. Thank you very much for finding that for us, Tammy. Miniature-calendar.com, a new picture every day, and Tammy picks one out for us every week. That is wonderful. Japanese website. It's amazing. We've been doing this years and years, and they always come up with different things, and that biohazard now has put me right off eating my bananas. Excuse me. Thank you very much. So, do keep in touch. Those pictures from Steve and from Bob are an example of the sort of thing we love to share with everybody. It don't have to be about radio either. So do keep in touch. Send them to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. If you can get them to us, your news and pictures by 3 o'clock on the day of NARC Live, we're happy to include them with us. Excuse me. Now, 2 weeks ago, hay fever's getting control. 2 weeks ago, we set a competition. And we asked you, what on earth is this? Now, I think that's quite difficult. I can see Rob just having a good close look at that picture in the corner of my monitor here. So, what do you think that is? Have we got any... Firstly, I ought to see, has anybody got...
No, I don't think we have. No, we haven't got any.
Oh, Rob's just put his hands up, so he's not too sure. Well, I think there's a bit of a clue here. Anyway, I won't spoil it. Let me read it from the beginning. Right, these are the great answers we've had. Steve, G3EVA. This week's item is a mobile phone vibrator motor.
Bob, G6PWS. That's a vibrator motor out of a mobile phone. Looks like one from an iPhone, but then they are all the same. Very small.
Bruce, G4KZT, says, my guess is this is a tiny motor with an off-centre spinning weight at the top. Uses a vibrator in a mobile phone.
Daniel 2E0JNW. The current mystery item is a vibration motor, cleverly photographed to hide the shape of the unbalanced weight attached to it.
Who took the picture, Tammy?
I did.
Mike, G8EY, says, this one has shaken me. It's an electronic Mexican jumping bean, as found in mobile phones with a silent or vibrate mode, a motor with an out-of-balance weight on the end.
Kevin M0UJD says, is it a haptic feedback device?
There's always one, isn't there?
Yeah.
Who has to say it like the posh stuff? Mark 2E0YUU says, is it a vibrating motor from a mobile phone?
There's a theme going on here, isn't there?
There is.
Michael M7XSP. It's a micro motor for vibration feedback in a mobile phone.
James M0ZAH says, I believe this week it's a vibration motor usually found in a mobile phone.
And Martin, G7UGB, I think this week's what on earth is a bottle of Tammy's nail polish when she was in a goth era.
No, I read that and I didn't tell you about it because I can't decide if he's either looking at a picture of something else or do you think that is right?
I have to say, actually, because I know how big it actually is.
Yeah, well, we better reveal. We better say what it is. But
right.
Martin, I love the answer. That's one of the best answers I've ever had. Because I decided that you probably do think that that's what that is. So anyway, Tammy, what is the answer?
It is. I turned the picture around for this time. It is a
Look
vibration motor.
Now that's from Tom GXQD, and the funny bit of story behind it, which Tom I'm sure won't mind me telling you, is that he bought it at a rally, I think Bury St Edmunds rally actually recently, and he thought they were micro switches.
Oh, did he? I've got
Which
a
I
pack of 5
suppose-
here.
Yeah. So anyway, if we could use this, if we could go to a camera. Thank you very much, Tom, by the way, for sending that in. I'm going to show you how small that is, because I haven't seen one of these for quite a few years, I must admit. And I was really surprised when I saw how small this one is. I've seen them, but not how small it is. So I'm going to try and show you this. Let me see if I can hold it up closely. So to this, I'm going to keep hold of this. This is a £1 coin. And hopefully you can get an idea how small and tiny this little motor is. And if I hold it like that, maybe if I can hold it, good job I've far by now, isn't it, today? You could just see that off-centre, I think they call it an eccentric weight at the end. If I try and, God, this is difficult.
To be fair, actually, you can see it better on the photo.
Oh, thanks. I'm trying to do these things live. Have you ever seen Blue Peter? That's not live anymore, you know. Anyway, there you go. You can see it. It's a wonderful little bit of technology.
But if you look at the actual size of it, because what Martin said about the nail polish, actually, you could make that into a nail polish bottle or maybe a perfume bottle if you have miniatures. I'm thinking of miniature calendar, although that would be quite large.
Yes.
That would be
could be a
larger
good one
than
for
what
miniature
they
calendar. Yeah, maybe that's
or
what Martin
something.
was alluding to.
maybe. If you had something in a bit bigger scale, maybe
When I read it, though, I
1
thought,
in 40
what?
or something.
Knowing what it is as well. But anyway, that is wonderful. That packet of 5 of them that Tom gave
Yeah,
us,
I've got
he literally
pack
did
here.
mean it. This is how they come, and if you've seen machines that assemble things, you'll know they come on these things. They're called ammo strips. If I can hold it up to that camera. There we are. These are called ammo strips, for obvious reason, if you think about it. And often components are packed like that to be automatically assembled on machines. But again, it's very flipping small. Again, if I hold that there, you can see how small those tiny motors are. But then phones are small, so.
Yep. That's
Anyway,
that's
fantastic,
quite a
isn't it?
large component for a phone, isn't it?
Well, it is for a mobile phone. If you think of every little ounce of space
Yeah.
they're trying to save in a phone. Anyway, great item. Didn't fool most people, except possibly Martin with the bottle of perfume, but not too sure about that.
I think you might have been tricky.
Thanks a lot anyway. By the way, we're still on the lookout for items. So if you find an item like that, or anything like that you think will fool our audience, then we look forward to getting them. Send them to that usual address. So anyway,
Ralph says, is that the £1 he lent you?
no, it is not. That's why I'm keeping hold of it, because we did this once a long time ago, and you took the money. Right, let's have a look now. What possible quiz that we've got here? What on earth? For next time, this is what on earth is this? Oh. Now you've got something on there to sort of get an idea of scale. Yeah, the bricks. But what is that, or what is it for? Can't give you any clues. Do you know? Answers to us, not on a postcard, but the real there. Send it to us, radio@dcpmicro.com. If you know what that is now, why don't you answer it now? But you've got just under 2 weeks before we see you again. And we'll reveal all then. This is a really unusual item, I think. That's going to fool people. Fool me. Thank you very much. So we're almost ready to meet our guest tonight now. But before we do, just to let you know what's happening this week at the club. So, of course, we've got, as you know, we've got the silent key sale at Paul's this Saturday. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, we've got the GB2RS News on GB3NB. On Monday, not strictly speaking a club event, but we've got that tonight at 8, all about Maxwell's theories in 45 minutes. And then on Wednesday, the 3rd of September, a week from tonight, we're meeting back at the school, at CNS School, for a social informal meeting with that popular show and share table. And it's also Bright Sparks for our young people after the summer break that we've given them, because they're back at school next week. Oh, where's a month gone? And of course, as I keep saying, then please do keep us in touch with your news and your stories and everything. And if you do want us to send one of these cards to anybody, anywhere in the world, to help cheer them up, we're very happy to do that on behalf of you and everybody else in the club. Just let us know on this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. Now, I almost want to say that tonight's guest needs no introduction, not just because he's been featured on our show for several times now, but his name is synonymous, his surname particularly, Sherwood, is synonymous with the world of results, with the world of how do you find out independent reviews and trusted facts and figures about radios. There's been his name, the Sherwood numbers have been around for years, and we're delighted to have him coming to us live now from the States. So welcome to Rob Sherwood, NC0B. Hello, Rob.
Greetings, and thank you very much for the invitation. And by the way, I use a knife with my banana also.
Oh, do you? So, well, does it look like that then with the hazard, the
Yes,
biohazard?
yes.
Does it? There you go. I'm going to try
Anyway.
it tomorrow. I'll try it tomorrow, Rob. But anyway, it's lovely for you to join us again and give us an update. And you're going to help us work through those figures, aren't you? And also, you're going to, I think, update us with some of the newer rigs that have been on since we last saw you. But as always, at home now, if you have any questions or comments for Rob, this is a fantastic opportunity to speak to somebody, I think, who probably tests more radios in our hobby than anybody else. This is a great opportunity. You can put them onto Facebook or onto BATC, and we'll read as many as we can to Rob at the end. But now I'm going to hand over to Rob for his presentation, and we'll see you later for questions. Thanks, Rob.
Very good. And just to let you know, since we've had the option of zooming across the pond or zooming around to any place, this is the 10th presentation to the UK since that started. It's just so amazing, and an honor to be able to do that.
Well, wonderful. And thank you very much for doing this for us.
So we're going to talk about the quote Sherwood table and what do these numbers mean? And unfortunately, at times they're misinterpreted. So let's see what it's all about. If you've been to my website, this is the top few radios on a list that goes down to 158 radios. So unfortunately, we have wrong assumptions made at times. So we're going to talk about that. Let's explain what do some of the columns mean. So let's go back 51 years. What data did we have on radios 51 years ago? Well, the specs were rather limited. Well, we had sensitivity in microvolts, and I still use that for sideband sensitivity in my website, mainly because of archival. I mean, we go back to 1976. Selectivity, well, of course, there was probably some information about that, and possibly shape factor. Cross modulation, I haven't seen a cross modulation figure for decades. That was really for an AM operation. Anyway, all this changed in 1975 due to articles in QST and Ham Radio magazine. So what was new 50 years ago now? Well, with the two publications, we had some new definitions. Noise floor in dBm in a 500 hertz CW bandwidth. And as you can see up there at the top, that's a noise floor, meaning 3 dB signal plus noise to noise ratio. And then also the two-tone dynamic range test, again on CW, using a 500 hertz filter. But back then, when it was first published in 1975, they only did testing with two signal generators 20 kilohertz apart. Now, if you've been in a DXpedition pileup, the QRM is not 20 or 30 or 40 kilohertz away. And that measurement was already obsolete for testing my R4C. And then along came up conversion radios, and possibly the first one was the Drake TR7 in 1978, just 3 years later. So that was a design trend that went on for at least 20 plus years. So what was the problem with this dynamic range measurement? The topology of the superhet radios had changed. They had a wide first IF filter above 10 meters or above 6 meters. So we had this first IF filter typically 15 kilohertz wide, and then lots of gain, 20 or 30 dB a gain before we got to the final selectivity in the second IF that was typically between 4 and 11 megahertz. So what could happen then with all those signals in a 15 kilohertz bandwidth could cause the radios to overload. But the 20 kilohertz test data that was published then for quite some time only didn't show the problem. Well, I started testing at 2 kilohertz just 1 year later in 76, but it was only available in a mailed flyer. Of course, the web didn't really exist then. But here's the numbers you could expect if we compare back then. A 20 kilohertz number was like 80 dB to 90 dB, pretty darn good considering that many years ago. But the 2 kilohertz data which would apply to a CW pileup, probably RTTY. Well, the number is dropped to 65 to 75 compared to 80 or 90. So that was the problem. So where are we today? Well, QST took quite a while to move between just publishing 20 and then probably 5 and then finally 2, but they've had 2 kHz data now for quite some time. So both QST and my numbers have both the 20 kHz and the 2 kHz data available. Now there's about 14 columns on that website and over 150 radios. There are a few duplicates because of second samples, but there's really 158 entries. Now, all these radios are sorted, in other words, ranked by one column. You can't sort by every column simultaneously, obviously. So it's all sorted by the near the right-hand column, 2 kHz dynamic range. Unfortunately, hams tend to only look at that as though that was the only thing important. The radio's position on the table is not an overall ranking because there's all that other data plus physical things like ergonomics. So the other columns are not ranked top to bottom, but contain lab numbers for all the other measurements for that specific radio. So there was a podcast about a month ago that I was listening to and enjoyed it. And the podcaster was carrying the new Yaesu, comparing the new FTX1 field, which would test the same as the 100-watt version. And the dynamic range that I measured was 91 dB, perfectly good number. And he was comparing it to an ICOM 705, another small QRP radio that tested at 88. Unfortunately, the reviewer assumed that because the Yaesu radio was slightly above the position of the ICOM radio, that it was also more sensitive than the ICOM radio. Well, that was totally wrong. Here's the data if you just went to the sensitivity column. Well, the Yaesu was 0.9 microvolts and the ICOM 0.67. So that's the thing to really emphasize. If you want to compare some other measurement like blocking or noise floor or LO noise, you got to look at that column for that radio. So you're probably not going to be comparing 158 radios, but maybe 3 or 4 at once. So it's not a big deal. So that's the deal, is the 2 kHz ranking is just that one data point. If you want to compare noise floor, you really need to go look at that or whatever else we are interested in. So what else should you not do? Well, don't buy a radio today by one number. There's so much involved with today's fantastic radios. They've all got software in them. So today there's more than 20 transceivers that have a close-in dynamic range, I call it DR3, of 90 dB or better. So other important issues, well, they're not noise floor, they're not sensitivity. That's usually not an issue for most of us. But do compare the user interface, the knobs, the buttons. Maybe they're hard buttons or soft buttons on the LCD. What type of display does it have? Do you run it with a computer or is it standalone? I happen to prefer take it out of the box and plug it in and it works, but some people just love running their radio with a computer. Ergonomics, is it easy to use or is it clumsy? And then the menus. Do you have to go into a menu in the middle of a contest to make some simple adjustment? Hopefully not. So what I recommend is become friends with members of your ham club that's near you. Probably if you're looking for a new radio, somebody in the club may have it and would be happy to show off his radio at his QTH. So also, if you've got a ham store near you, I know here in the States, some of the ham stores have a tower and a Yagi, so make use of it if that's available. So now we really have, of the major 6 original equipment manufacturers, great performance from them all. There's no reason to say I have to change from something I'm using now or as a brand. So you can contest and DX and RAG-chew and run FT8 with dozens of rigs. 20 years ago, you couldn't buy a 100 dB radio. Now it's common. It's kind of in the middle of that list you saw. So choices by brand cost and size make important decisions for you. If you're going to be operating like on a soda site, you probably don't want a 35-pound radio. So I operated multiple CW contests the fourth quarter of 2022. I had $1,000 radio and a $1,500 radio, and I didn't use anything else for that 3 months, going back and forth between the two operating positions, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, there was amazing difference in the interface, user interface, the ergonomics, and all that, but both radios performed well. So here was my setup there in October through December of 2022 when I was evaluating the FTDX10. It's under the monitor. Normally there had been an ICOM 7610, but not for that 3 months. The other radio, the FT710, kind of is the sister radio and the first direct sampling that Yaesu came out with, and it's under this monitor on the left, and you can see it's pretty tiny. So that's what I did, and it was enjoyable to really use a radio for that length of time. So here's a list of the 26 top individual models from my website. But that's not the counting from 1 down to 26, because there's a K3 and a K3S and a K3 compared to a Flex. There's second samples for direct sampling radios, because every radio that has an ADC chip is slightly different, even if it's the main and the sub, or just another sample of the same radio. The difference in the dynamic range measurements is a few dB. So there are duplicates there where appropriate. So look right there in the middle, 99 to 100 dB in the middle, where 20 years ago you couldn't buy that. I've had the pleasure of operating 20 of these 26 in major contests. CQ Worldwide, ARRL-DX, 160DX, and 10 meters as examples. So how are you going to select a new radio? Well, I'd say pick one of the top 26. That'd be a good start. If you're married to one brand, fine, you got choices. Pick a price that fits your budget. The price range of current radios today are from $1,000 to $9,000 from the 6 major OEMs. And again, the size is important. I imagine DXpeditions will be liking to take a 20-pound radio, not a 35-pound or a 50-pound radio. The same for SOTA and POTA. So now let's look at some of these lab numbers from my website and what do they mean? So left to right. Well, on the left is the model, and then there's noise floor. And really, in an urban environment, that's hardly a problem. There's so much noise from electronic equipment today. Everything's got a microprocessor in it. And even on 15 meters, it's likely in a quiet location that band noise is higher than receiver noise. So the noise floor, though, might be important with a limited antenna. Maybe you've got an end-fed half wave that's 15 feet off the ground for your SOTA site, and the extra sensitivity may be useful there. If you can, improve your antenna before buying a new radio with better lab numbers, because really antenna is super important, as is directivity. Directivity not only gives gain, but it reduces QRM a lot more than the gain. AGC threshold, that's another column. Band noise on the lower bands is always above AGC threshold unless you've adjusted it. So consider using attenuation and RF gain control, or like the sliders on a Flex or an Apache, to set the threshold modestly above band noise. This reduces operating fatigue, particularly if you're in a contest for 10 or 15 or 20 hours, my goodness. You don't really want band noise to be as loud as every signal. It just makes you tired. If I'm doing search and pounce, I definitely want to have the AGC set properly. Blocking. Superhet radios will block eventually with some out of passband, out of the DSP or crystal filter passband. It could be out of band. So direct sampling radios, they're a little different. They have that ADC chip. analog to digital computer chip. And it's a voltage device. So once you exceeded the voltage limit on the chip, it crashes. So most of the time, blocking or ADC overrange is not an issue. It's really most likely if you've got a nearby ham line of sight, 10 blocks away, or maybe there's, in a case like in Boulder, Colorado, someone up on the mountain 5,000 feet above the city, line of sight could be 5 miles. So what's a number that you should think is adequate for probably almost everyone? 125 dB, which is typical for an ADC type direct sampling radio. Some of the superhits are as much as approaching 150. Sensitivity. Now, remember I said the CW noise floor was the 3 dB signal plus noise to noise ratio. Well, for sideband, it's a 10 dB signal plus noise to noise ratio. Again, with the noise floor and today's man-made noise, sensitivity is rarely an issue. Band noise is a problem. Now, again, if you're up in the middle of nowhere on the soda site, it may be different. It's interesting that if we go clear back in time to like the S-Line or the Drakes, they didn't have a preamp you turned on and off, but it had an RF amplifier. So the sensitivity or the noise floor, the sensitivity was 0.15 microvolts is pretty much standard. And so today with a modern radio, if you pick preamp 1, again, it's pretty much typically 0.15 microvolts for sensitivity. Reciprocal mixing dynamic range, probably not fully understood by most people. It's kind of esoteric, but it has to do with noise on the local oscillator or the clock oscillator in a direct sampling radio. Legacy radios, again, like the Drake and the Collins or Swan or something, they didn't have an LO noise issue. They had a PTO that was darn quiet, or a VFO, and then band crystals. But when early synthesized radios came along, they were terrible. So luckily now in the last 10 years of new equipment from the main 6 OEMs, we don't have a problem with noisy local oscillators or noisy clocks. If you do want to compare RMDR that's say published in QST to a radio that's on my website, it doesn't list RMDR because I have local oscillator noise back 50 years ago. RMDR was only invented as a term in 2012. So if you want to compare the two, here's an example. If the LO noise in my column was minus 137, that's in a 1 hertz bandwidth. If you want to compare it to RMDR, you subtract 27 dB, and that number would be 110 instead of 137. Front end selectivity. Well, most rigs have some sort of LC front end, often a half octave meaning like 7 to 8 megahertz or 7 to like 9 megahertz, or maybe they're ham band only. A few have a tracking preselector, the FT DX101D or the MP, or the 2 ICOM, the 7610 or the 7760. So to give you an idea how sharp are these tracking preselectors, well, they're not very sharp. On 40 meters, the minus 10 dB bandwidth, in other words, providing 10 dB attenuation, is a total bandwidth with the Yaesu of 250 kilohertz. In the case of the ICOM, 500 kilohertz. In other words, plus or minus 250 in that case. A lot of people say that if you adjust the Yaesu tracking preselector and off-tune it, it makes the QRM go away, which makes no sense. We're talking about a filter that's 250 kilohertz wide on 40. Now it's going to be narrower on 160, wider on 10, for instance. So just be cautious of that claims that it's a magic bullet. The main improvement for a tracking preselector is reducing out-of-band commercial signals, or if you're on the low end of 40 meter CW and the broadcast stations start at 7.2, that helps. Of course, if you have field day an LC bandpass filter is probably necessary if you've got multiple transmitters, particularly on the same band you've got a problem to deal with. So back to dynamic range that started this whole discussion. So with more than 20 transceivers, with a close-in 2 kHz dynamic range of over 90 dB, most hams don't have an overload issue. But a roofing filter is handy if you have something really close by, like maybe 20 dB improvement if your ham 10 blocks away is 60 over 9. Or your field day, where you've got CW, maybe FT8 and FT4 and SSB all on the same band. In that case, the roofing filter is a major improvement. And if you're running a multi-station, whether it's multi-2 or multi-multi, the multi-station and the run station are going to be on the same band. So again, the roofing filter can be helpful. So let's give an example of when these numbers actually, how they apply on the air. So I'm going to use 10 meters because in my case, if I'm pointed to JA on 10 meters, I can have a really low band noise. Now, if I'm pointed to the Caribbean, it's about 8 or 10 dB noisier just all the time. So if we had a 7760 with a measured noise floor of minus 133 dBm, and we had a band noise of minus 130, which I have measured at my QTH, then you're going to start to see potential intermod with signals that are S9 plus 42 dB. So it gives you an idea. Noise floor clear up to 40 over 9 or more. In Europe, when we had WRTC the last time, the teams that were using the 7610 said they had to have 9 dB or more attenuation, or the OVF indicator would flash or be on solid. That's because the ADC chip has a voltage maximum. But here's the deal. At night on 40 meters, band noise is typically a minus 100. Your 7610 or similar radios are going to have a noise floor of like minus 130 or better. You don't need 30 dB difference between the noise floor and band noise. That's crazy. So adjust attenuation or your RF gain or whatever works for you. I would probably have picked 15 dB and not 9, because if you're on the low end of CW on 40, just think of those megawatt stations above 7.2 or similar ones that are below 40 meters on the 49 meter band. Make use of your tools. Preamps are tools. Attenuators are tools. RF gain is a tool. So what mistake is most often made? A radio has to be sensitive enough for 10 meters and now 6 meters. Everybody's got 6 meters on a current radio, but they're too sensitive on the low bands. I have people that say, well, I'm on 40 meters and I'm running a preamp. That's crazy. Now, maybe high noon, but not at night. So use your tools. I would say for any radio, a 12 dB attenuator on 40, 80, and 160 is a good starting point. So what's changed? Well, up conversion radios were replaced with what we call down conversion, which just means an IF around 5 to 10 megahertz. Once the Entech Orion 1 and then the K3 came out a long time ago, up conversion radios with a wide, high frequency first IF filter went obsolete. Both the Orion 1 or the Orion 2 and the K3 or the K3S have a low frequency first IF, which means you can have a narrow roofing filter. You can't have for an inexpensive price a narrow filter at 50 megahertz. Also today, we've got 3 Yaesu rigs with roofing filters and 2 Kenwood models. Now the typical up conversion radio had a dynamic range at 2 kilohertz of about 70 dB. But look at a K3S 105. So with the exception of the very expensive, now discontinued ICOM 7851, with its just over 1 kilohertz roofing filter at 64 megahertz, it was also high performance at 105 dB, just like the K3S. Just note that the ICOM 7760 is a direct sampling radio that has no roofing filters. It was not really a replacement for the 7851. So what about direct sampling rigs? Very popular today. The ones that I've measured, the dynamic range at 2 kilohertz, although it hardly matters in the case of a direct sampling radio, between about 97 and 107. That's with the built-in dither, which is a linearization technique that's done different ways, but it smooths out the little jitters in the ADC chip. Even the ICOM 705, which I ran on 160 and 10 meters, I loved it, has no dither option, but its dynamic range was 88. Nothing wrong with that. So just note that when you're testing a direct sampling radio, it really doesn't matter much whether you're testing it at 20 kilohertz, 10, or 5, or 2. Occasionally a little less at 2, but for the most part, it's nothing like that big jump from 90 to 70 with the Hector Superhead radio. So what rig should you own? I'm often asked, why don't I own the top Yaesu rigs on my website? Well, I do actually own the FTDX 10, and I did own the 710 for a couple of years and used it for 3 months. You saw the photos earlier. But for me, deciding on which radio works best for me deals with the user interface, the ergonomics, the band scope, the waterfall, for instance. So I happen to pick a 7610. But that's subjective. It doesn't mean you should pick it. Sit down in front of any radio you're considering if you can, because they're so different in how you interface with the radio. Does transmit differences matter? Well, we've only looked at receiver issues up till now. So what currently is available to clean up our transmit signals? Well, the biggest difference is pre-distortion on single sideband. 3 of the top 6 OEMs offer some kind of pre-distortion. Now, Apache Anon has had pure signal for over 12 years. ICOM has had digital pre-distortion, they just call it DPD, for over 1.5 years. And Flex is currently in beta, but they've just started shipping pre-distortion. They called it Smart Signal. There's other differences like peak licks and transmit noise, but we're just going to look at sideband and how to clean up the band. So here's a screenshot taken with an Apache, my friend Tom in Boulder, Colorado. And there are 2 stations on the air, that QSO plus him, of course, both running legal limit. Now, if you look at the waterfall there in the middle, the top of the waterfall pictures, that was an Apache 200D running pure signal, adaptive pre-distortion, plus the amplifier, whatever it was, I don't know, was in the correction loop. Look at that signal just straight up and down. It's a rectangle. Now there's just a few little spikes on the right-hand edge that blip out there a little bit, but hardly even notice them. And you can see some sort of a wobbly signal is probably somebody's charger for something, making some RFI. Clearly stands out that you can easily see it. Now the one on the bottom with the waterfall, that was me with a TS890S, a very nice rig, an Alpha 89, again, a nice tube amp, but a little stronger than the Apache. But you can see the total bandwidth due to the splatter is about 3 times the main signal width. And this can obviously be a whole lot better, as you see with the Apache. So here's another time, which in this case, I got to come out on top. This was in the middle there with the waterfall. That was me with an ICOM 7610. You know, when that radio was designed 8 years ago or more, and it's been on the market for at least 7, they planned ahead for digital pre-distortion, which finally came out. So this case, even though I'm only cleaning up the exciter, the 7610, I'm driving a tube amp that's not in the correction loop. And look how clean it is. It's just a few little dots there to the right. You can say, well, there's a little bit of teeny bit of splatter, but boy, not much. Now down below there at the bottom is the Flex 6600M driving their Power Genius XL, and the station was W5AP. Again, look at the total bandwidth is about 3 times what the desired bandwidth is due to splatter. In this case, when the picture was taken, look at the top at the band scope as opposed to the waterfall, because we just barely captured another transmission by the flex. And you can see there that the splatter is obvious on the band scope. So you go down about 30 dB or 35 and it starts to show up, which is about the way most rigs are. So this was not like an anomaly with the waterfall. You can see it there on the band scope. What you see on a band scope today is real. If the guy's wide, he's wide. So the Apache Annan Pure Signal by Warren Pratt, NR0B, happens to live in Loveland, Colorado, and I'm going to have lunch with him in just a few days, along with some people from Flex. And so it's going to be an interesting chat about Pure Signal, I'm sure. So while all the pre-distortion solutions work barefoot, not all support a third-party amplifier in the correction loop. So Pure Signal has always supported third-party amps. All that's needed is an internal or an external sampler. You'd usually want like a 50 dB sampler, meaning that what's coming out the sampler is about 50 dB lower than what's going to your antenna. Now, Pure Signal happens to recalculate continually. It's like distortion calculation corrections on the fly. Now, that's different than the ICOM. The ICOM is static and you calibrate it, but you saw how well it worked there on 75 meters. And then the Flex will recalibrate if you change frequency. So some comments on the digital pre-distortion, or ICOM, came out in November of 2023. Both rigs, the 7610 and the 7760, offer pre-distortion barefoot, but for as far as supporting an amp, only the new PW2 is supported with digital pre-distortion in the correction loop, not the PW1 or not any other amp. Now it's interesting, I measured both the 7760 and the 7610 as far as their distortion. The 200 watt rig, the 7760, is about 8 or 10 dB cleaner than the 7610, probably because it's got a 50 volt PA instead of 13 volts. But by the time you drive a PW2, it all comes out the same. Now the PW2 is not quite as clean as the exciters, but the 7760 is a 200 watt rig, I think pretty popular in Japan because they have a 200 watt license. Of course, you've got the FTDX 101 MP, the TS990, and the Apache 8000 that are also 200 watt rigs. Flex's Smart Signal. Well, they didn't call it Pure Signal because that's sort of copyrighted, so they call it Smart Signal pre-distortion. Since as of currently, it's in beta, meaning it's software, it's still not totally released as ready to go. It's not supporting an external amplifier, but this will change soon. Now the Smart Signal can calibrate on voice or a built-in two-tone test. It only recalibrates though if you change frequency by 10 kilohertz or more, or you change the output power. So it sort of makes its own calibration and just stays there. Unlike the Apache, which just sort of does it on the fly all the time. Now the Smart Signal only is supported by the Flex 8000 series and the new Aurora high power products that were announced to date. I don't think they're shipping yet. So important factors to consider. You've got great rig choices today at reasonable prices. Try out a rig if you can before you buy it. This is because there's so much difference in how it's going to interface for you. Few hams have to deal with overload with a 90 dB or higher radio, but we do need Elecraft, Kenwood, and Yaesu to offer pre-distortion like the other three. You saw how much it reduced this adjacent channel splatter. Luckily, if you're driving a tube amp, at least with the ceramic tubes, I don't have any data for a 3500Z, but if you've got a tube amp and you're just cleaning up the exciter, it works just fine as you saw. So the bottom line is, even though there's people look at my website and say, oh, let's pick a radio with one number, look at the whole picture. Look at all the physical interface, information that you can sit in front of the radio and say, is this for me? Or all those other things like sensitivity, blocking, etc. So if you have any questions on my webpage, always feel free to contact me. If I haven't shipped the PDF of this PowerPoint, I'll do so right after our presentation. But it frustrates me that people will look at my website and say that everything higher than a radio they're looking at, everything is better, when it's only sorted by that one column. So remember that. So the bottom line is you should enjoy using your radio. If it's a struggle, then consider something else. If it just works like magic, you're set and enjoy it. So here's my email address, rob@nc0b.com, rob@nc0b.com if you want to ask any questions later. So we're ready for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Rob. We've got your details there for anybody, but we'd love you to ask them now, live, and then you'll get an instant answer as well, instead of sending it by email, even though that option is there. I think we've only got one comment so far, so I'm sure a lot of you have got questions for Rob, either on understanding those numbers or maybe specific radios even, because I guess, Rob, have you tested, do you think, most of the currently available radios now?
I think definitely yes. I mean, it's probably, we have to go, I'll get questions on radios that came out 20 years ago. Why is it on my website? Well, there aren't too many, but there are a few. But yeah, anything that's the current product, I think I've tested it. Now, this is mainstream, not your $100 radios out of China, for instance.
No, sure. Maybe we could ask about that, because actually, I will just mention, that's not really a question for this, but one of our members, Mike M7TTT, has said that he spent his day setting up his new Zygo G90. Now, I don't think you test the Zygos, do you?
Yeah, I tested the G90. Yeah, the G90 is on the website.
Okay, because they are becoming more mainstream, aren't they? There is, like a lot of things, with Chinese electronics, there's a lot of quite good Chinese engineered various products for various markets, but including radios like the Zygo. I wonder what your view is of those generally, rather than the main players like the Icoms, the Elecrafts, the Yaesus and Kenwoods.
Right. Well, I would say your $500 radios, and a lot of them are QRP, 20 watts or less, and they do okay. Usually their weakest point is the user interface, and the screen might be the size of 2 postage stamps, but they work. And so if you're going to haul a G90 up to a soda point, great. What I don't look at, there's actually at least 10 or not 11 QRP radios on my website, and they're not inexpensive. But then you look at your $100, $200, $300 radios. I don't test those. I could drive myself crazy. Now the league does. They pretty much have to test anything, which is a struggle, because when you're testing a low-end radio, you sometimes have to jump through hoops that I'm not happy with to make it look good. So anyway, that's another subject. I won't go any further in that. But certainly I had the G90 and some other, the one out of Russia, I think it was, that can't think of the name right off, but it had really high quality connectors, but oddball connectors, but they had adapters that came with the radio. So I did play with that one too.
Was that the Expert? Maybe
no.
The Expert? No.
No, I've tested one of the Expert, but it was, I can't think of it. Maybe somebody, right.
Okay, well, anyway, at home, if you have any questions or comments, this is the time to ask them of Rob, either on BATC or Facebook. If you're watching this live, you can ask questions, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. First one, not really a question, but a comment from somebody who's watching one of our guests, I think, DG7DD, a Christian. And he says, selecting a column and auto sort of your listing would be great, Rob, but you know that already. Look for someone who can help you out there. It was a topic in one of the groups recently, as you know. So I guess what he's saying is, you were saying, don't just look at that one column. You've had to pick one column to put them in an order. But I guess what he's wanting, and maybe others want, is a way of just selecting what parameter that you could choose to put those columns in order. Would that be a fair interpretation?
Right, and you can import it into Excel. And I'm going to post an example, although someone already did, that then you could sort it as you want. A couple of years ago, Frank, I think it's K4FMH, if I've got the call right, he was looking at not only sorting things by on demand, but also looking at eham.net reviews. And so at one point, he had a static copy of my website, which would only be modestly out of date now, and he could probably update it. And then you could actually sort it. So if you've got Excel, uh, uh, I would say to look for a post in the next day or two on how to import that into Excel and then go for it.
And then you can organise it as you want. But I think if I'm right in thinking, one of the messages you've given tonight is don't just look at one number, even if you were to then have a slightly different league table, as it were, because you choose a different column. There's a lot more to these radios than that. It's just a lot more complex, isn't it, than just picking one particular parameter.
Right, for sure. See, Rick says, no, they disappeared. Let me get.
Yeah, I see. By the way, Rick has come back on a message here saying the Russian rig is the Lab 599 TX500.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
That was the
Thank
one.
you, Rick.
Okay, we've got several
Okay.
guests watching. I know you asked us to send the links to a few of your friends and colleagues who you work with. Or just to give a name check to Ari TF1A, who's watching us live from Iceland at the moment. So welcome to all of you who are watching this. But as I said, we haven't got many questions for Rob yet, and I'm sure there must be some out there. I've got a question from our Scottish correspondent, you remember, Ralph 2M0RHT, who asks, what is your personal go-to radio in your shack for HF work using a microphone, i.e. voice, and not this funny CW thing, he says. Apologies, I think there was a tongue in cheek there.
Well, as I mentioned, I have 3 operating positions to make it easy to do comparisons. Now, sometimes I'm only comparing one at a time versus call it my reference radio. It used to be an ICOM 781, which was a pure analog radio, and now it's the ICOM 7610. I happen to like that user interface and all the other features. So that's my go-to radio, and most of my operating is sideband. I probably work 6 contests a year, mostly CW when I'm comparing radios, because that's sort of an acid test. But of course, I work CQ Worldwide sideband and ARRL DX sideband. So I happen to use that rig, and I also just happen to use a Heil GM5. And even in my shack here in Denver, where my 7300 is, that's a GM5. So that's what I use, but I do EQ. One thing I think we really need to pay attention to do is how do you EQ your voice to have the best intelligibility so the sibilant sounds are clear. Sometimes you'll be in a contest and it'd be darned you can hardly understand what the other guy's saying. So if your rig can show your transmit signal, I like the passband from, let's say, 100 hertz to 2.9 kilohertz to be flat with the EQ, which in the case of the ICOM is 4 out of 5. But some of them are parametric, and that's a lot more sliders up and down. But if you don't EQ anything and you just talk and look at the transmit passband, either you're seeing your own or someone you're talking to can see it. If it's a downward slope, like a ski slope, that's not the best intelligibility. So usually you want to boost the highs depending on your voice and your microphone. You might cut the lows a little bit. I use a non-directional microphone because it doesn't have proximity effect. But the directional microphones, the closer you get to the microphone, the more bass there is, except for a few, like Electro Voice. So really, I consider EQ for sideband major adjustment that everyone needs to do.
Yeah, it's a big adjustment. I'm thinking at the moment of a lot of newcomers to this hobby, and a lot of these things, EQ, equalizer, they are just lots of terms which they won't have learnt in their basics, especially if they're maybe at foundation, our entry level here in the UK. So some of these figures are going to, I think, and things that you've been talking about, not unreasonably though, Rob, for those who've been in the hobby a long time, but for them, it must be really difficult to know what to decide. And it is, I think you've pointed out tonight, it's not just about how much money you've got to spend. Only because you've mentioned them all tonight, and I've looked up the prices. So to get an idea, for example, if you look at the Icon range at the moment, the main range, you've got the IC7300, which is about £1,000, I guess a similar number of dollars. You've got the 7610 at about 3,000. So in other words, I'm not talking about the specifics, but it's 3 times as expensive. And then the new 7760 is nearly £6,000 in the UK. So there's a huge amount of difference there, isn't it? It's 6 times the amount. Can I ask you, it's a very difficult question to answer, but unless you have unlimited funds, and not many people here will, can a £6,000 radio be worth 6 7300s in the performance?
Well, the answer is no. But of course, the interesting 7760 has a remote head. It can actually support 5 remote heads. So if you're into operating from a hotel, or you have a quiet location and you're in the city part of the time, as with many, you can operate remote. So that's the case where you can just take the remote head. It is a 200 watt amp, but to me, I don't want a 200 watt rig because I'm driving an amp. It's an Alpha, it's an ACOM. So one thing, I want to jump back to this sorting issue, which is perfectly fine. But I pointed out, most of the time, the noise floor is not the issue. It's local noise. It's band noise. Usually sensitivity is not the issue. It's band noise. Blocking is really going to be unusual unless you've got a ham down the street, or field day, certainly. And I guess you guys have something like field day. So
yeah, we do have field day. In the first weekend of June, actually, in this country, and we've got several other events as well. You talk about band noise. You're talking about noise, then interference locally from other things, other neighbours and other bits of equipment. Are you?
Yeah, absolutely. But like I mentioned, there are microprocessors in dishwashers and washing machines and refrigerators. And of course, you charge your iPhone or whatever you've got, your Android. All these chargers make noise. That's local noise in your house, but the neighbors have noise. And then you just got plain broadband noise, like that comment, 40 meters at night with an omnidirectional antenna right out of the ARRL handbook, about a minus 100 dBm, where your receiver may be minus 133, which it can't use that at night on 40 meters or 80 or 160. So while I understand that it would be interesting for some people to sort the table, most of those aren't going to matter because we're stuck with local noise coming in your antenna that is way above receiver noise.
Yeah, I mean, at least you mentioned broadband, but at least now we've gone through ADSL, VDSL, which are both types of modulating on wires, but at least in the UK, and I imagine similar thing in the States and maybe other countries where people are watching this now, we're now going on to fibre here in the UK in quite a big way. They've promised to convert nearly everybody in the next 2 or 3 years. So that will at least reduce the amount of noise, hopefully, that's going to come down the telephone lines.
Right, and for the most part, DSL and VDSL was more discrete birdies as opposed to just broadband noise. A generalization there. Now, luckily, that broadband over power line died. I don't know. Did you have that in England?
Yeah, we did. They did try. I'm trying to remember the name of that when they were trying to twist wires around power cables or something, weren't they, or whatever? But yeah, that died. And I mean, it really is in the UK at least a big push to get everybody on fibre, so that all of the cables, and as we know them, are probably going to be disconnected. I mean, they're enforcing that now, so I think at least here that's going to be a problem gone. But as you say, on the other side of the coin, many people have much more electronics than they used to have, and they've got things like solar panels where you've got quite high power electronics like the inverters needed to convert that solar energy into something to put back into the grid. And that's where a lot of those, I believe, create a lot of electricity. So we may be trading one type of interference for another. But yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about all this. I must get back to some of the questions that we are getting now and a few comments, but this is your last chance really at home. If you want to ask some questions of Rob live, this is do it now, please, on BATC or Facebook. Roy has got something to make you smile, hopefully. Roy G3ZIG has said he still enjoys and uses his old Collins S lines as his main radios. Hopefully that's made you smile.
Well, this makes sense. I mean, when I was licensed in 1961, at 14. For some reason, my dad a few years later did not buy me a Collins, but he bought me a Drake because it was like a quarter of the price. But you can enjoy the classic radios. I did own an S line about 10 years ago. Of course, I had to quote fix it like some of my R4C mods, but you're not losing anything from the standpoint of sensitivity or noise floor. And if you've got a CW filter in your S line, you're probably in great shape. And if you're working sideband, I did broadband my S line, a 75S3 and a 32S3 to 2.9 kilohertz instead of 2.1. So that was crazy Rob doing something like that. But yeah, enjoy. There was a post just yesterday, I believe, on another ham that's on the ICOM reflectors, the groups.io here in Colorado. And he was saying he's got a Swan or something or other that he can hear just as well as with his 7300. And that is not a surprise at all.
No, indeed. Well, anyway, you have certainly made him smile there, Roy. Richard, G4CDN, asks, what do you think will be coming out of the R&D departments in the next year or so? That's a good question.
I don't think there's any big changes in the world from a R&D. I get people who say, well, we want 18-bit or more bit ADC chips, and that really doesn't buy you anything. I mean, look at the numbers. Compare a 7300 with a 14-bit A to D to a 7610 with a 16-bit. And most everyone is using 16-bit. Well, there's no significant difference other than a few dB in dynamic range between the 14-bit and the 16-bit. And if you just looked at it from a mathematical standpoint, it would be less than 1 dB difference. So I think it's really in software, which are the things we want to look for. I mean, we've got hardware's better than we need for most people most of the time. But we've only got 3 of the 6 OEMs doing pre-distortion. Right now, when ARRL finally prints a review using their Clean Signal Initiative information, there's only one so far that's passed, which includes splatter with pre-distortion, CW key clicks, and transmit composite noise. Noise mitigation, I'd say, is a wide open territory. Warren Pratt, who writes this DSP software for Apache Anand, he's got one noise reduction option. He calls it learned noise reduction. He's got something like a 70 megabit data file of noise of all sorts of types, and the software goes out and looks at what is the best way to try to cancel out the noise coming in your antenna versus my database of noise and make an improvement there. By the way, speaking of fiber, I've got gigabit fiber here, up and down. It's like 900 up, 900 down. Out there at my contest station, I've got fiber in the middle of nowhere. It's 45 miles east of Fort Collins, out in the grasslands, and I've got fiber there. So fiber is the way to go for sure.
I think it is, and at least that's one less bit of interference, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
A theory, which is a nice theory, comes from Rick, M7GMT. We haven't mentioned the AI word yet today, but this is a good point from him. He says that RM noise is the most impressive bit of R&D recently, using AI to remove band noise. And he's given a link there on BATC. You can click on the link yourself if you like. That's interesting, isn't it? Because of course, we're all getting used to now hearing about almost daily how AI is going to change our lives and changing our lives. And just like we as amateurs sit there and tweak various knobs and controls and things to hear something differently, it's not beyond thinking about, reasoning that it won't be too long before there will be AI functions where we will do it for us to the style or the particular modes and things that we enjoy ourselves. Have you had any experience with AI yet?
Well, I'm assuming that the RM noise is the one that you subscribe to the product, and it's on we'll call it in the cloud. So it takes your received signal, sends it to the cloud, processes it, and sends it back. What's the first thing you'll say that, well, what about latency? So there's going to be latency there. But of course, anybody running remote's got to deal with latency. So I've heard about it. I haven't used it. But you would really prefer in the long run that database and that algorithm would be in your local PC, not across the pond.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some more questions for you. We don't want to miss anybody's if we can help it. Thanks, by the way, for some of you just putting comments and things on there. I'm not going to read all of them out, but they'll be there on BATC for Rob and others to have a look at as well, and useful links as well. A question that's come from Ken Linney is, have you tried hillbilling? And if so, what's it like?
Well, yes, I did quite some time ago. And a matter of fact, Hans Hilberling, way back when he was designing the PT-8000, said, I want to be at the top of the Sherwood list. And there was a relatively brief time when he was, but it really wasn't a contest radio. And all the selectivity was discrete crystal filters. They were 16-pole crystal filters. Originally, the narrowest one was 500 hertz. That was totally inadequate for me as a contester. So then he came up with a new filter board, well, two of them because it has dual receivers, that had a 250 hertz filter. But because the insertion loss was such a problem, he had a 4-pole, an amp, a 4-pole, an amp, 4-pole. So he had 16 poles distributed with gain in the middle, which was the way to do it. So I just would say it was an unusual radio, very expensive, the last of the pure analog designs. But just for instance, it's a 200-watt radio. The control for the power output was a tiny little knob, and it was really touchy, and you could mistakenly overdrive your amp if you weren't careful. So I did have one. It's on the website. I had one for about 6 months or maybe a year because we did have to upgrade the filter board, and actually N0QO did the actual installation of the new filter boards. So it used to be about $18,000 US, and I don't know current pricing. I have no idea if they sold 100, but it pretty much a niche radio. But it looked like a piece of Hewlett Packard or Roden Schwartz test equipment when they had the covers off and you saw it at the Hamventions.
Mm-hmm. I know that I think in this country, Martin Lynch sells them, and I did see them promote it recently. It's quite a lot of money over here as well. It was well over £12,000 or £15,000, I think, in our money. So, still got some more questions for you and comments. Mike G4DYC says, "Hi Rob, many thanks for all your valuable work. Do you think rigs are getting more reliable now? Also, if necessary, is dealer etc. service reasonably okay out there if there's a problem?" So I guess he's asking, have you had any issues like that, warranty or any experience or feedback that you might get from people who've bought various rigs over the years?
Well, I would say they are pretty reliable, but once a rig's 30 years old, as in the case of when I finally retired my ICOM 781s, they were beginning to have a problem. But considering probably most of us don't own 30-year-old rigs that are our day in and day out choice, pretty good. I think here in the States for ICOM, there's a gentleman in Michigan that's just a genius, and people are just ecstatic. He does component level repair as opposed to replacing a board for $1,000. So that's good. Kenwood used to have a facility in Virginia that was really good, and they had one in California. For some reason, they dropped the one in Virginia. The one in California was terrible. They finally got rid of them, and now there's a company in New York that does Kenwood service, and they're what little I know, I've heard nothing bad at all. So I think they've got a good choice there for Kenwood. And personally, well, of course, if it's in warranty, it doesn't matter much. But if it's out of warranty, for ICOM, I'd send it to the guy in Michigan. Of course, I don't know what you've got in the UK. Yaesu service, I don't know much about that. I've heard pros and cons, so I really can't comment. There was two radios that I owned, the 10 and the 710. They work fine. I did sell the 710. I still have the 10. There's been no problems. Also, just a quick note, the 7610s from ICOM had a LCD problem with ones that sort of came out a year after introduction. Two of mine go clear back to December of 2017 or something. Never a problem with the screen or anything. But Ray Novak's had an extended warranty. If you had a bad screen, it'd be replaced. All you'd have to do is pay shipping to ICOM. So they stood behind it. We really do need good factory service or independent service if it's available. I mean, everything's service mount today. Believe me,
Yeah.
at 78 with bifocals, I'm not fixing, not replacing the service mount resistor.
I mean, this is one of the things, isn't it, that of course in our hobby, many of the radio amateurs of the past were keen electronic engineers and could do pretty much component level servicing and replacement and wanted to. Of course, it was just part of the natural part of the hobby, really. Now, it's not so much a problem if you can do it, even if you can physically do it. So many of the components are proprietary, integrated circuits in particular and things like that, that it would be probably difficult or impossible to do your own repairs even if you wanted to, because you just wouldn't be able to get the parts. I suspect that's one of the problems more recently.
Well, look at example when Flex went from the 6000 series to 8000 series, because eventually those chips became unavailable. So not only weren't they available to the OEM, if you wanted to buy one, you might have to just find something on the internet, and it could be counterfeit out of China. So yeah, not a great plan there.
No, absolutely. Good point. It's coming to the last questions now, I think. Neil G4JUV has said, it's good to see new rigs appearing with HDMI ports enabling big screen spectrum displays. He says that's long overdue and a big improvement in usability. I guess you're less likely to have to need a PC to use with your radio.
Well, of course, for logging, for contesting, you have to, but the 7300 Mark II, which is announced, supposedly it'll be seen in Japan by December, supposedly seen in the US by May, Hamvention. It does have the HDMI output. Now, personally, I've never used a big screen, but some people have 2 or 3 of them. So this is just totally up to you, what works and is in your wheelhouse. But certainly most rigs do have an output. There have been some issues with the output, and the monitor goes to sleep and the radio goes to sleep. I think that's happened with the K4. There's been something where you need an adapter with a Yaesu, and if there was the adapter wasn't really the right one, it could blow out the rig, and so it's kind of a iffy thing. But I think I'm sure people will be happy with the 7300 Mark II if they've been crying for a big monitor, because it's there. And of course, the 7760 has it, and the 7610, just for instance.
Yeah, I saw the 7300, which is one of the most popular HF rigs of recent years, I should think. I just saw that they got a Mark II. We haven't seen much of it over here yet, any information about it much, but we've got our National Hamfest, as you've probably heard, in just over a week's time. So hopefully we might be seeing the Mark II version of that radio here. Really are coming to the last little bits now. By the way, Neil just added, looking at the shelves behind you there, he says, are your shelves earthquake proof? So
we don't have many earthquakes in Denver, that's for sure.
Well, even if you did, I think you'd be safe, wouldn't you? Anyway, let's get back. I had a question here from, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but it's from Ari Thor, who asks switch power supply or analog power supply. I guess he's asking, preferences, although it's, to my experience, it's nearly all switch mode now.
Well, I happen to use Astron linears. I use the RS35M for everything in the shack, except my 630 meter transverter, and it's a 20. Switch mode can produce birdies. Some are worse than others. The one time that I was in Texas, in Corpus Christi, with my brother-in-law, and we both had a switch mode Astron, an SS25, I guess it was. And we just had a buddy pole about 20 feet away or 15 feet away, and it picked up birdies like mad. Now, if your antennas are far away, you probably don't hear it. I do have a couple of switch mode Astrons that have been used at times to make measurements. So it's more a case of, if you got to haul it around, you're going to want the switch mode. All the ICOM ones were switch mode. But I prefer the linear because there's no way it's going to make interference, but they weigh, many pounds. And I'll, like I say, I've got about 5 of them in the shack. So my choice is linear, but if weight's an issue, go with switch mode.
Yeah, Ari was asking what is better for transceiver, I guess, so which is better. But it's just, I think also far as I know, the regulations are changing anyway, and that you have to make power supplies much more efficient, which sadly linear power supplies with the big old traditional transformers are not as efficient as a switch mode, and I guess that's part of it. We really are getting to last questions now. Sorry, Rob, did you want to come back on that?
No, that's true, and power factor correction is also a requirement. Yeah. So maybe the linears are on the way out. I don't know, but I like them.
Our own Roger G3LEI, who booked you, of course, for this talk, and books many of our talks here, for most of them for NARC Live. He says, a great talk as usual, Rob. Please mention to your Flex dinner guest that us Flex users are still waiting for the noise mitigation as promised 7 years ago. Guess I shall have to upgrade to the 8000. That's what Roger says. So please take that to your dinner guests next week.
Well, of course, if you belong to the flexgroups.io reflector, let alone the factory one, that's scuttlebutt all the time complaining about, like you say, 7 years you're waiting for something. Now, you've got the patience of Job. I have no patience like that. If I buy something, let's say my Canon digital camera, I buy it for what it does when I bought it, when it came out of the box, and I'm not buying it for something that might come down the pike with a firmware update. That's just me. But if I needed better noise mitigation after 7 years, I'd be annoyed. Now, at this dinner coming up, we'll have Gerald and his wife, and Steve Hicks and his wife, and several other Flex people. Warren, who writes Pure Signal, and his wife, and me and my wife. So it's going to be a fun evening or afternoon, but I don't know that we're going to be getting down to nitty gritty. Like, why has it been 7 years since you just said you're going to ship something?
Well, you could maybe just slip it into the after dinner conversation. I mean, it's good, and a serious point though, and I'm sure some of this is social and friendship as well that you're meeting. But it is encouraging that manufacturers do talk to you personally for all of the work. And as I said at the beginning, you must have more experience surely than anybody in the amateur market of all those radios out there and testing them to the limits that you do. Has there ever been a case where a manufacturer has maybe changed or modified their product because they've seen some of your results and thought, hang on a minute, that's not what we thought was happening? Have you got history of that?
Well, look what happened with this 7300 Mark II. They dropped the ball on transmit composite noise. They were only looking at phase noise. And a lot of OEMs will have an expensive piece of test equipment that will measure transmit phase noise. But amplitude noise is in the equation, and often the amplitude noise is worse than the phase noise. So the ads for their specs for the 7300 Mark II talk about improved reciprocal mixing dynamic range, which would be a noise issue, and talking about transmit composite noise. Now, let's define that. We've got phase noise, amplitude noise. You add the two together, you have composite noise. Unfortunately, if you look at a QST for the last, 50 years or something, anytime they said they were measuring composite noise, they were really only measuring phase noise. This hopefully will be fixed by next year, because I know Dr. Rhoda said, well, you really shouldn't have to worry about amplitude noise in a properly designed radio. Well, the real world is amplitude noise is a bigger problem in many cases than the phase noise. So that's a case where probably not just me, but customers saying, look, this radio makes a bunch of noise on field day. Take the Hilberling. I said I was using it in a CW contest, and a 500 hertz CW filter was not adequate. So what did they do? Designed a new filter board. It must have cost thousands, and shipped out 2 boards. So yes, it does happen. Not a lot, but it does happen.
Well, that's testament to the work that you've done. I know you've always been keen on also being independent. I remember when we last talked to you on NARC Live, or maybe it was an RSGB production, where we asked you, and you said that you used to go to stores and pick out your own radio rather than being sent one by the manufacturer, so it couldn't be kind of a special one, a good one, as it were. So, and I know that your integrity is beyond doubt, and we really appreciate everything you do for our hobby, because it really does benefit all of us who are looking to go and buy a radio. I think most people would come and look at your ratings, and we're really, really grateful. So thanks both for coming and doing this presentation tonight. We're honoured to have you here, but also thanks for what you're doing for the wider amateur community. Thank you very much, Rob.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. And certainly integrity is where it is. It can never be a conflict of interest, which would just blow the whole thing. So that's very important. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Many, many thanks, Rob. We hope to see you again here on NARC Live. But thank you for this evening.
All right. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. And thanks to all of you as well for your comments. I haven't read every comment there because a lot of it was discussion going on there, and I think that would have just sort of confused the conversation, but it's there particularly on BATC for all of you to look at. So thanks once again to Rob NC0B for tonight's presentation, and as I said, all the work that he does. So that's almost it for NARC Live tonight. Just to remind you again what's happening for the club in the next week. Saturday we've got that open day sale for Paul G3 SEM silent key sale. On Sunday the 7 p.m. we've got the GB2RS news at 7 o'clock on GB3MB, and next Wednesday the 3rd of September we're back at CNS School when we've got Bright Sparks, and also it's a social informal there, and then the following Friday it is the Hamfest coach trip. Now I did see a note actually on one of I think possibly on Facebook tonight to say someone was going to send their form tonight. You really do need to do that. If you want to come and you want to have a wristband to be able to walk in and you want to pay £30 and get all that in, your last chance is tonight, because first thing tomorrow I will be writing an email and ordering the exact number of wristbands that we need. So if you've been putting it off for the last few months since I've been promoting it, don't put it off anymore, because this will be your last opportunity. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thanks to Tammy. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time for NARC Live. But until then, from Tammy.
Bye-bye.
from me, David G7RP, take care. Look after yourselves and each other. Bye-bye.